In the final days of the judges, when Israel had no king, and every man measured right and wrong by his own eyes, a story unfolded so violent that later generations could barely speak its name aloud. It begins not with a battle or a miracle, but with a Levite living quietly in the hill country of Ephraim, far from the tabernacle, far from any war. He took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, a woman bound to him by custom, though never fully by love, and for a time their life together seemed ordinary. Then, for reasons the text never fully explains, she left him and returned to her father's house, and 4 long months passed before he came looking for her. He arrived not with anger, but with gentleness, hoping to win her back, and her father welcomed him with feast after feast, reluctant to let the visit end. Day after day, the old man urged him to stay one more night, one more meal, until the Levite finally insisted on leaving, unwilling to delay any longer. They set out late in the day, the Levite, his servant, the woman and 2 donkeys, moving toward the hill country as the sun began sinking toward the hills. His servant suggested they stop in Gibeah, the city that would one day be called Jerusalem, but the Levite refused to lodge among foreigners who did not know his God. So they pressed on toward Gibeah, a town belonging to the tribe of Benjamin, believing that among their own people they would surely find safety for the night. What they found instead was silence. No one in the town square offered them shelter until one old man returning from the fields noticed them. The old man was himself a foreigner living in Gibeah, an Ephraimite far from home, and something in him recognized the danger of strangers sleeping unprotected in that square. He urged them inside his house, warning them plainly not to spend the night in the open, and for a moment it seemed the worst had been avoided. Inside, they ate and rested, the donkeys fed, the long day's tension finally easing, unaware that outside the men of the city had already noticed their arrival. As evening deepened into night, a mob gathered at the old man's door, wicked men demanding that the visiting Levite be sent out for a purpose too dark to name. The old man begged them not to commit such an outrage against his guest, offering instead his own virgin daughter and the concubine to satisfy their violence. The crowd would not listen to reason, and in the end it was the concubine who was forced outside into their hands, into the darkness of the street. The text draws a curtain over what happened next, saying only that they abused her through the night until the first light of morning finally released her. She made her way back to the house at dawn, collapsing at the threshold, her hands reaching for the door she could not open, and there she remained. When the Levite rose and opened the door to continue his journey, he found her lying there and told her simply to get up, for it was time to go. There was no answer, no movement, and in that silence, the full weight of what had happened settled over him like a stone he could not lift. He lifted her body onto the donkey and carried her home, and once inside his own house, he did something no one in the story had asked him to do. He took a knife and limb by limb divided her body into 12 pieces, one for each tribe of Israel, and sent them out by messenger across the land. No message accompanied the pieces beyond their own silent horror, yet everyone who saw them understood that nothing like this had happened since Israel left Egypt. From Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, the tribes were seized by the same reaction: shock, outrage, and a demand that something be done. Nearly 400,000 armed men gathered at Mizpah, united as one body, determined to hear the full account from the Levite's own mouth before acting. He stood before the assembly and told them everything: the night in Gibeah, the mob at the door, the abuse of his concubine, and her death by morning. He asked them what they intended to do about such wickedness committed within Israel, and the assembly answered with one voice: this could not stand. They resolved that not one of them would return to his tent until Gibeah had answered for what had been allowed to happen inside its walls. 1/10 of all the fighting men were chosen to supply the army, while the rest prepared to march against a single town belonging to their own brothers. Messengers were sent throughout the tribe of Benjamin, demanding that the wicked men of Gibeah be handed over so evil could be purged from Israel. The Benjaminites refused outright, choosing instead to gather their own warriors and stand behind the men who had committed the crime rather than surrender them. 26,000 swordsmen assembled from the towns of Benjamin, joined by 700 elite soldiers from Gibeah, each trained to sling a stone with unerring accuracy. Against them stood an Israelite coalition of over 400,000 men, an imbalance so vast it made the coming battle seem impossible to lose. Before marching, the Israelites went up to Bethel to inquire of God, asking who should attack first, and the answer came back, "Judah shall go up first." On the first day of battle, the Benjaminite defenders inflicted a devastating blow, cutting down 22,000 Israelite soldiers despite being outnumbered many times over. Stunned, but not defeated, the Israelites wept before the Lord until evening, then inquired again whether they should continue fighting their own brother tribe. God told them to go up again, and on the second day the battle resumed. Yet somehow Benjamin struck them down a second time, 18,000 more falling. Two catastrophic defeats against a vastly smaller force left the coalition fasting and weeping, desperate to understand why heaven seemed to favor the guilty side. This time the answer was different. "Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand." And the army prepared an ambush no one in Gibeah could see coming. Warriors were hidden around the town, while a smaller force lured the Benjaminite defenders out, retreating just as they had in the previous two defeats. Confident from two victories, the men of Gibeah chased the retreating Israelites away from their walls, unaware they were being drawn into a trap. The moment the city stood empty of its defenders, the hidden ambush rose up and set Gibeah on fire, sending smoke into the sky as the signal. When the pursuing Benjaminites turned and saw their own town burning behind them, panic replaced their confidence, and the battle reversed in an instant. The retreating Israelite soldiers turned back to face them, and now Benjamin found itself caught between two forces with nowhere left to run. 25,000 Benjaminite swordsmen fell that day, nearly the entire fighting strength of the tribe, cut down in the fields their fathers once settled. Only 600 men escaped, fleeing to a rocky outcrop called the Rock of Rimmon, where they hid for 4 months while their towns burned behind them. Every other town belonging to Benjamin was destroyed, its people and livestock put to the sword, until almost nothing remained of one of Israel's 12 tribes. What had begun as a demand for justice against a single crime had become something closer to the near extinction of an entire family within the nation. Only when the smoke cleared did the enormity of what they had done settle over the surviving tribes, who now faced an unexpected and painful problem. They had sworn an oath at Mizpah that none would give their daughters in marriage to any man of Benjamin, and oaths in Israel were not undone lightly. With 600 surviving men and almost no women left alive in their own towns, the tribe of Benjamin stood on the edge of disappearing forever. The very people who gathered to punish the tribe now wept over the possibility that one of Israel's 12 tribes might vanish within a generation. They searched for a loophole in their own oath, some way to provide wives for Benjamin without directly breaking the vow they had sworn before God. Someone noticed that no representative from Jabesh Gilead had come to the assembly at Mizpah, and this absence gave the desperate tribes an opening they needed. 12,000 soldiers were sent to Jabesh Gilead with brutal instructions: destroy the town for failing to join the war, but spare every virgin woman. 400 young women were found and spared, brought back to camp and given to the surviving men of Benjamin as wives to rebuild their broken tribe. 400 wives were not enough for 600 surviving men, and 200 of them still had no way to continue their family lines. The elders devised one final plan: pointing the remaining Benjaminites toward a yearly festival at Shiloh, where the young women of the town danced in the vineyards. They instructed the 200 remaining men to hide among the vines, and when the dancing began, to seize a wife for himself and carry her away. If the girls' fathers complained afterward, the elders promised to intervene, arguing that since none of Israel had directly given their daughters, no oath had been broken. The plan unfolded exactly as arranged. 200 women were taken during the festival, and Benjamin's line was preserved through a legal loophole around a national vow. In this deeply unsettling way, the tribe of Benjamin survived, its fighting men reduced to 600, its towns rebuilt slowly by women taken through conquest. The very last line of the entire book of Judges offers the closest thing to a moral. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. The text repeats one final time, as if daring the reader to notice how differently it might have gone. No prophet intervenes to stop the mob at Gibeah. No king rises to prevent a civil war that nearly erases a tribe. No villain is punished cleanly. Instead, the story ends in ambiguity. A nation acting in righteous anger nearly destroyed one of its own limbs, then schemed around its sacred oath to fix the damage. Modern readers often ask why the Levite is never named, while the concubine, whose suffering drives the entire narrative, remains equally nameless from beginning to end. Scholars have long debated whether this anonymity was meant to universalize the horror, making it a symbol of a nation's moral collapse rather than one family's tragedy. Others point to the deliberate echo of the story of Lot in Sodom, noting how closely the scene in Gibeah mirrors that earlier account of a city demanding a stranger. The parallel seems intentional, a way of asking whether Israel itself had become no different from the very nations it had once been called to replace. The book of Judges builds toward this final horror through story after story of moral decline, each cycle of sin and rescue slightly darker than the one before. By placing this account last, the writer seems to argue that without a righteous king to hold the nation together, Israel was capable of Sodom's own darkness. This theological argument would later be used to justify the rise of the monarchy, the demand for a king that eventually brought Saul, then David, to the throne. It is worth noting that Saul, Israel's first king, came from the very tribe of Benjamin that this civil war had almost erased from existence entirely. Had 600 men not survived at the Rock of Rimmon, later listeners would have known there could never have been a King Saul at all. The near destruction of Benjamin becomes, in hindsight, a story about how close Israel's future kings came to never being born in the first place. Archaeologists have found evidence of destruction layers at sites associated with ancient Gibeah, dated to roughly the period this story is traditionally placed within. While such evidence cannot confirm the exact events described, it does suggest the region experienced real violence and burning consistent with a story like this one. The number of casualties reported in the hundreds of thousands has long troubled scholars, who note population estimates for the region make such numbers difficult to reconcile. Some suggest the number refers to military units or clan divisions rather than individual soldiers, a possibility that would make the numbers considerably more plausible. Whatever the precise numbers, the narrative's core claim remains unmistakable. A single night of violence in one small town triggered a war that nearly ended a tribe. The concubine's dismembered body, sent to all 12 tribes, functions in the story exactly like a battle summons, an image so shocking it could not be ignored. In a world without messengers or broadcasts, this gruesome method ensured that every tribe understood the same brutal truth at nearly the same moment in time. It remains one of the only instances in the entire Hebrew Bible where a human body becomes the actual message rather than merely the subject of one. The story never explains why the men of Gibeah felt entitled to demand a stranger from a host's home, treating hospitality as something force could override. What is clear is that hospitality in the ancient Near East carried sacred weight, and violating a guest under someone's roof was among the gravest of offenses. That the crime went unpunished by the local town itself, forcing outside tribes to intervene, reveals a total breakdown of the structures meant to enforce justice. Later, Israelite writers reference this story as shorthand for depravity itself, invoking Gibeah the way later cultures might invoke other names as symbols of moral failure. The prophet Hosea would later mention the events at Gibeah directly, describing his own generation as having sunk to a corruption reminiscent of that earlier catastrophe. This suggests the story remained a living memory for centuries afterward, not merely a folk tale, but a genuine national scar later generations still measured themselves against. For all its horror, the story ends not with punishment perfectly distributed, but with a fragile peace bought through further violence against Jabesh Gilead and Shiloh. The women taken in both instances are given no voice in the text at all, their experience folded silently into the larger story of tribal survival. Modern readers frequently note that 3 women suffer directly across this single narrative: the concubine, the daughters of Jabesh Gilead, and the dancers of Shiloh, none named. Their collective silence stands in stark contrast to the detailed political maneuvering of tribal leaders who debated oaths, loopholes, and strategies to preserve Benjamin's future. This imbalance is precisely why many scholars consider Judges 19 through 21 among the most morally uncomfortable chapters in the entire Hebrew Bible to read. It offers no easy hero, no divine miracle to celebrate, only a nation forced to look directly at what it had become in the absence of leadership. The final judge of Israel had not yet risen when this story took place, leaving a vacuum of leadership that ordinary people filled with their own fractured judgment. Samuel would eventually emerge to lead Israel toward its first king, closing the very door this story left open, a nation with no one to answer to but itself. Whether read as history, warning, or both, the story of the Levite's concubine remains one of the darkest and least discussed narratives in the entire Bible. It stands as a permanent reminder of what a society can become when everyone, from mobs to elders to entire tribes, decides right and wrong for themselves alone.